Good morning, all. Very warm welcome to all of you to this interaction being organized by PIB. And today is the 5th day of IFFI, and I hope all of you are having a nice time here at IFFI and also enjoying Goa. Today we have with us two films from the International Panorama. One is The Young Arsonist, the other one, How to Blow Up a Pipeline. From the Young Arsonist team, we have director Sheila Pai and also Agatha Del Zorbo, who has acted in the film, one of the lead actors, and producer. And from the second, How to Blow Up a Pipeline, we have, on the dais, we have the director Daniel Goldhaber, and also the actor, producer, and writer, one of the writers of this movie, Ariella Barra. And also we have the team here, Jordan Joel, who is the executive producer and the writer also, and the editor, Daniel Garber. A very warm welcome to all of you here. First we'll go to start with The Young Arsonist. So The Young Arsonist, I'll give a brief about this movie. It's set in the 1980s rural Canada, and it portrays the story of a group of girls who form a very intense and obsessive bond while reclaiming an abandoned farmhouse in an isolated farming community. And in the course of the cinema, we see how their relationship with one another is strengthened, and it's tested over the course of the film. So we'll have a short trailer of this, and we'll move on to the next one. Please. Can we switch off the light, please?
I fucking love this song!
Nice, visually very intense. We'll come back to you. And I'll just go to the next movie also, and just then we'll open up for your comments. The second one, How to Blow Up a Pipeline. The synopsis goes, it's a crew of young environmental activists executes a daring mission to sabotage an old oil pipeline in this intense and timely thriller that is part high stakes and a haste, and a part radical exploration of the climate crisis. So it's basically explores the climate, deals with climate activism, and this is based on a book, How to Blow Up a Pipeline: Learning to Fight in a World on Fire, by Andreas Mal. We'll have, unfortunately, we don't have a trailer with us. We will hear about the film more from the makers themselves. Let me start with Young Arsonist. Sheila Pai, if you can tell a few, what went behind this movie? What was the inspiration for this movie?
Yeah, so as it was my first feature film that I wrote, it's always a good place to start to write from what you know. So I drew a lot of inspiration from my childhood, and there were so many people in my life that I knew growing up. It was set in the place where I grew up, and a lot of the characters are based on people that I knew. And of course, while you're writing the story, you change things a little bit. But also I got the inspiration, my hobby as a child was breaking into abandoned houses in the countryside. So I would break into these houses and imagine the stories of why these houses became abandoned and go through all the rooms and invent ideas in my head. So really it came from that.
Okay. So I think this movie had it had its premiere in TIFF 2022. This in Goa, IFFI 53, it had its Asian premiere. We'll also like to hear from the producer, Agatha Del Zorbo, please.
Yeah, so the film premiered at TIFF and then went to the Tallinn Black Nights Film Festival in Estonia. And then after Goa, it's going to the Cairo International Film Festival. And just to tell you a little bit about how Sheila and I met, before I became a producer, I was a programmer at the Toronto International Film Festival for 10 years. And I programmed some of Sheila's early short films, so that's sort of how I was introduced to her work, and really became an admirer of her, her work as a visual artist and a short filmmaker. And then when I started producing, we bumped into one another. Yeah, and then she sent me the script for The Young Arsonists, and I really loved the project, and I had a lot of faith in her vision and what she wanted to do with it. So we decided to collaborate.
Yay!
We'll hear from the other two and then we'll open up. It's okay? Right, thank you. Okay, we'll also like to hear from you, Daniel. So why this movie? And climate change is a subject which is being, every day, right from, we hear it from the global level, from the global leaders, and right from a village level, a common man at the village also speaks about climate change. It's becomes a common lexicon in our day-to-day affair. And what inspired you to make this movie on climate activism?
Yeah, I mean, there we go. So my parents are climate scientists and have worked in climate research my entire life. So I've actually grown up with kind of the doom of, this kind of impending apocalyptic crisis that is facing humanity. And I think that, I had been looking for a long time for a way into a story about climate change and a story about climate activism. And I had kind of personally always been interested in telling a story of youthful revolution. And the real thing that sparked kind of the film itself was just the book, which is a work of political theory. And the book essentially outlines the fact that, every social justice movement in kind of global history, especially over the last 250 years, has had at least some component of property destruction or sabotage as a cornerstone of its praxis, from everything from American independence to Indian independence to the fall of apartheid in South Africa, has these aspects of kind of it's this notion of the radical flank theory, that you have people who are kind of pushing outside the bounds of the law to kind of force social change. And what Andreas goes on to argue is that the existential threat posed by climate change to every single living creature on planet Earth is such that there is debatably a justification for the destruction of fossil fuel infrastructure. And this was an argument that I think we all found extremely compelling, and that we wanted to see what would happen if we dramatized it through the eyes of characters. So the book itself is a very radical text, but from the standpoint of a film, I think that, we saw it as less, advocating for action like this and more exploring action like this. Why would 8 young people go out and attack fossil fuel infrastructure? What are their reasons? What are their internal conflicts of the group? But also wanting to explore that question from the standpoint of an action film, a heist film, something that, is very populist and that can also speak across, cultural and national lines. And I also just, part of the inspiration for the project was also having amazing collaborators, with Ariella, Jordan, and Dan, people who also would, I think, challenge the ideas of the book and challenge the ways that we would, I think, bring these ideas to life through characters and through kind of human drama in a way that, really explores the complexity of the issue.
Thank you so much, Daniel. So the book, which it's based on, How to Blow Up a Pipeline, Learning to Fight in a World on Fire.
Yeah.
So Andres, the book is basically a work of, it's non-fiction, as you said. It's actually some ideas only. So we had a writers, they must have had a hard time, bringing a work of non-fiction to convert it to a work of fiction and adapt it to a movie. I would like to hear from one of the writers, Ariella Brera, and later on I will come to you also. Shaul, I will come to you also. Can you please share with us the journey, how you converted, how hard was it for you to convert all these ideas into fiction?
Thank you. I think. So, when we first read the book, it very immediately sparked exciting conversations between the three of us, and you would think that it might be difficult to adapt a piece of academic text, but truly it gave us the freedom to do whatever we wanted with it, and we knew that the thing that we had to stay true to were the core tenets of the book, but even within that we could explore our own relationships to them through characters and narrativizing them. And it was very exciting because this book, this piece of academic text that has been read by the select few that engage with this type of work and with this sort of scene, we came in with the idea of expanding it and making it more accessible to more people, and we got to kind of think about all the different people that would be involved in a movement like this that we would want to see coming to the theater and talking about this and thinking about this, and we created our cast of 8 characters with that in mind, and from there the story was actually very easy. It was a process-driven heist film for anyone to enjoy and walk away thinking about, and hopefully expanding their ideas about the current movements as well as future movements and their roles in it.
Thank you so much, Ariella. Can we hear from you also? Shaul, please.
Yeah, I think that's very well said, Ariella. And I think one of the really exciting things about turning something nonfiction into something fiction is that you can go from an argumentative form to something that is very exploratory and something that gets down to lived experience. So instead of saying, I feel this way, it's saying, what is it like to feel this way? What is it like to live in a world where it feels like maybe the only option is to step outside the law and attack fossil fuel infrastructure? What's the experience of that? And if you were to make that choice, what would it be like to go through that? So I think that was just what we were interested in. Thanks.
Yeah, we'd also like to hear from Daniel Garber. So, what went into editing the movie? How was the process? What are the challenges? Come on.
Oh boy. Well, the process of editing the movie was, I think, a very unusual one in a lot of ways, since there were so many people in the editing room for so much of the process, and it was really, it was a long process of determining how much of the political theory we could work into the film, and how much to balance that with the concerns of character, and getting exactly right the balance between the present tense narrative of what's unfolding in this heist. And then deviating from that to go into each of the characters' backstories, making sure that we were doing justice to each one of them, and really giving a sense of their personal narratives and their personal grievances without deviating too much from what made the film so exciting and what makes it succeed, I hope, as a genre movie. And so it was very helpful to have all of these voices in the room helping make sure that that all worked.
Thank you so much, Gaba. Unfortunately, we couldn't even see the trailer. It's fine. Hope you'll be able to catch the movie soon. One of the screens here. Yeah, and I'll open the floor for questions now. Yes, sir. Please, a question. No, you speak on the mic, please.
You have set the film in mid-80s, and also you have selected your characters who belong to not very rich families. Is there any aim behind this intention?
As I said, I'm not sure. Now it's on. Yeah, the economic realities definitely form a part of these girls' lives, and it was definitely a world in which I grew up in. I wasn't extremely poor, but I wasn't rich either, and it's sort of a really interesting to see when you have to live in a rural area, you don't have a lot of money, and you invent your own reality and your own fun, and that was really a part of these girls' journey. They didn't watch TV because they didn't have TV, and they would break into farmhouses. But yeah, definitely that was a part of the world that we created, and like I said, it's just sort of coming from my own reality as a child.
You have suggested in the film that father of a girl,
Yeah,
the boyish girl,
yeah,
abuses her. You have
Yes.
suggested that. Yes.
yeah.
So this also comes from your experience, or you have
Yeah.
known such cases?
Yeah,
in that period?
when I was growing up, a friend of mine. So her story kind of, obviously, like I was talking about before, when you draw on people that you've known through your life. It wasn't obviously the exact story, changed things, invented things, but her character was definitely influenced by that. And that was a really challenging scene to shoot. Yeah, and to, a lot of talking about it with the actors beforehand, and figuring out how we would deal with that subject matter, but in a very subtle way, not how we're used to seeing it represented.
Are these girls have some acting background, film background?
Yeah, actually, well, yes and no. Most of the girls had some experience, some more than others. You can kind of tell when the blonde girl, she had done features before. The two protagonists had a lot of experience. But Sadie Rose, the bigger girl, she didn't have any feature experience, but she was so wonderful. She had this like rawness and naturalism that just came out. So for them, it was really exciting, especially when we premiered in Toronto, because they could all be there with their families and we could all share that experience together. So it was exciting for them, and I really hope they do well. They're all very talented.
Another thing is, you have suggested death of
Sorry?
a boy, that girl's brother.
Sorry? Oh, yeah. Yeah, he's wonderful.
Perhaps he has committed suicide, or perhaps it was
Yeah.
accidental death, and
Yeah.
he receives the letter, etc., etc.
Yeah, it was.
So why this tragic touch?
Yeah, it was very interesting and exciting actually to figure out how I was going to treat a dead character and not make it feel like a fantasy movie or a horror movie or whatever. Just make it really, really tender. And I hope that came across in the film, that you understand that brother-sister bond and that tenderness there.
One question for you, sir. Yes. Are you supporting environment activism or environmental extremism?
Personally, I think that
Through your film.
I think the film is not really intending to support either. I think it's really intending to explore the question of environmental extremism. So I think it's more about, I think, trying to understand why somebody might engage in environmental extremism, while also understanding, and trying to be frank about the consequences of environmental extremism, both for the characters, but also for the larger world. I think it's one of the things about climate change that is so complicated, is that there's no easy answer. There's no magic bullet. There's no immediate solution for anybody. And I think that it's more about the film. I think the goal of the film is to provoke a conversation about that very thing, because I think a lot of the conversations that we're having about climate change and about the tactics to combat climate change are very limited, and have predominantly been defined by the same corporations and countries that have been profiting off the backs of climate change. And so the movie is really just trying to, I think, jostle people and get them to think and speak differently about the issue, but I wouldn't say that it's trying to propose a solution of any sort.
Of course, any struggle, such big struggles for that matter, they will have all kind of elements from the pacifists and the fatalists on the both both the extremes, and also we have such activists who will resort to such sabotage as acceptable means of fighting it. So they all will together probably win this activism for us. Will bring the change. We hope so.
And I mean, that's the idea of the book, that is looking at this kind of ecosystem of activism and saying, it's more than just the pacifists. It's more than just the, it's interlocking groups working with the same idea towards the same goal, even if they have differing ideas in their tactics. And I think that this is just a notion that we haven't really explored when it comes to the struggle against climate change. So, yes.
I think the right mix of all these are needed to get that the right solution.
Yes.
The one alone can't win this war.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Coming back to yours, you deal with teenagers, youngsters, the world are broken.
Yeah.
Families are decimated. So we have the genre, if I'm not wrong, in the Canadian film, Canadian Gothic subgenre. So did you really thought of this genre while making the movie, or your movie just somehow fitted into it?
It's so interesting that you say that, because I actually didn't even know it was a genre before I made the film. But I will say that a lot of my visual artwork, you can see it on nickandsheila.com, but it's definitely inspired by Gothic literature, and that is just like instinctually comes from my style of storytelling. So it definitely seeped into the film, but without me knowing. And the programmer, it was really, really wonderful to see him put it in that context, because all of a sudden it made total sense. I was like, yes, it is a Canadian Gothic film. But no, I did not know previously, but I'm very inspired by Gothic literature. Yeah, plural. Plural, yeah, because in the end it's just one, obviously, like real arsonist, but they all did it. Yeah.
Yeah. Any questions? Yeah, yes, please.
My question is to Sheila. You just said that you had a habit of breaking into barren houses. So didn't you have fear of unknown, that what will you encounter? Like, I can't imagine myself doing that. So.
No, it actually was the opposite. I liked having that feeling of fear a little bit, but also excitement and wonder, exploring stuff. So they were all, I made sure they were all in really isolated places. So nobody would catch me, but it was like that. It was sort of like childhood discovery and breaking into places. So, and actually, when I was just thinking of it now, when you talked about the inspiration, my very first film, I had a Super 8 camera, and I think I was 18 years old or whatever, but I broke into an abandoned house, put it on a little tripod, and filmed myself, and that was my little short film. So actually, maybe that was a subconscious inspiration for the film as well. But it's fun. I recommend it. You should try it.
And you said this is your first feature film.
Yeah.
So how was the transition? How you managed it?
It was very interesting, because it was to sustain your creative energy over a 3-year period was so challenging, because I was obviously coming from the art world, being able to get out my ideas really quickly, and making many short films. So I had never had the experience of trying to create that, and going through different periods where, I don't like the film, it's not working. And then it was so interesting in the end. The process has been incredible, and I can't wait to do it again.
Right. Yeah.
I have another question for Daniel. When it comes to, act against climate change, yes, it is everyone's responsibility, but we do have a debate between countries that those who are historical emitters or the biggest polluters, they should act more. So what are your opinions on that?
I mean, I completely agree, and I think I'm just on a personal political level very supportive of the idea of reparations, kind of generally speaking. But I think, one of the things about the film is it is, I think, very much an American film, and it is a film that was made from an American perspective, even if it's based on a European text. And I think that that's part of the idea, is that, I think that the United States especially is in a position to, we could reform our energy infrastructure if there was a desire, and that has been true the last 20 years. And so I think that the notion of a radical act like this taking place in the United States is also a question of, how do you break the stranglehold that corporate interests have over our national conversation, our national debate, our economy, when the consequences of our energy consumption and our energy use aren't even immediately being felt by us. They are being felt by places, on the other side of the planet. And there is a massive moral responsibility there. And that's one of the ideas that I think Andreas also directly confronts in the book, is this question of that moral responsibility, and, and then what are the potential justifications for attacking, again, in particular, energy and fossil fuel infrastructure in, the United States and Western Europe. So I completely agree with what you're saying, and I think it's one of the interesting things showing the movie in Asia and showing the movie, generally speaking, globally. I think the response is also very different, because I think that global relationships to oil in different parts of the world are also very different. So I think that, I appreciate the movie being seen as like an American film that is specifically talking about American infrastructure as well.
By the way, How to Blow Up a Pipeline also had its world premiere at TIFF 2022, and here they're having the Asian premiere. Daniel, this is your second movie, and your first movie was also something related to activism. What was it?
My first film was called Cam. It was like a psychological thriller about a cam girl whose identity is stolen. So there was, to some extent, a political component to the movie, only because it was a movie that was, about sex work, but it was written by a former sex worker and very much told from the perspective of a sex worker, which is something that is very uncharacteristic in especially, mainstream film when it comes to movies about sex workers. But there wasn't really necessarily an activist component to the movie. I mean, this is, I think, a significantly more overtly political film than that movie was, but I think both films are interested in using genre to talk about politics.
But you choose topics which are really burning those societal issues. You really choose them, and hopefully you're planning to make most movies on those lines.
Yeah, I think I definitely think that I'm predominantly interested in I think making movies that to me feel relevant, and I think that I think as somebody who is a fairly political person, that tends to be, I think things that are maybe on the fringes of a social debate, but I'm also interested in, I think, trying to maybe explore maybe somewhat less explicitly political film as well, trying to figure that out for what's next.
Yeah.
My question is to Sheila Pai. What actually is the message that you are trying to convey through the film? That I didn't see the film, but I read in some reviews that it basically says that there is no escape from the burdens of this world. There are two girls. One is trying to escape from her grief. The other one trying to escape from her abusing father. But in the end, that conflict continues. And is it not ending in a hopeful note? Don't you think that the world need a bit more optimism or hope?
Yeah. I hear you, but actually, it's not exactly the opposite. But when I thought about the main visual metaphor in this film, fire, I didn't think of fire as a destructive element. I thought it as an element to purify. So in the end, when she burns down the house, with the body inside it, it's not a negative thing. I saw it as a very positive thing that she finally found her freedom and faced her reality and is ready to move on. So by her burning down that house, it really, really was something for me very positive. Life is not simple and it's full of contrasts, so I didn't want to end it with like a necessarily happy ending, but not necessarily sad. So I did see it as there's a lot of hope. And actually, when we were on the set, the girls wanted to do part 2 because you kind of don't know what happens. Maybe they get caught, maybe they move on. I don't know. So it would be so interesting to maybe keep exploring it with the girls. I don't know. But I definitely didn't see it as a cynical film. And it's so interesting when your work is kind of a contrast of who you are. When people meet the happy, funny, smiley, and then they see their work and they're, whoa, it's dark and scary. So yeah, I kind of like love playing with those contrasts.
So, even I also haven't seen the movie, but those who have seen the film, I heard that it has very visually arresting and stunning imagery, surreal imagery. And by the way, Sheila Pai is also a visual artist. I guess you have brought your entire mastery of this as a visual artist into his films. You believe so?
Yeah, absolutely. Like one of the basic principles before I started even writing the script and before I really understood the story was color. Actually, I was like, this girl is yellow, this girl is red, this girl is blue, this girl is green. And that became my principle and to start exploring their worlds. And yeah, like when we were producing the film, I kept asking the producers for smoke. I need colored smoke. They're like, what is this colored smoke? Why do you need colored smoke on set? But that became a really interesting, just a very simple visual metaphor. And yeah, like I said before, I have some works in museums like the Smithsonian, and I'm a video artist and a photographer and a painter, and so that obviously inspires me.
So we have two contrasting movies here. One which talks about through trying to talk through the imagery and semiotics, and here we have a team. They want to blow up a whole pipeline. Case movie.
Maybe we should collaborate.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we can have a nice collaboration. Yeah. Anyone?
Oh, I had one really quick question for
Yeah.
Daniel. Has the author of the book seen the film, and
Oh,
what
yeah,
were his
he-
reactions?
He likes it a lot. I mean, he was involved in the process from the beginning, and you know, I think he was also very aware from the beginning that the movie would be, I think, fundamentally different from the book. But I think from his standpoint, he also understands very clearly the way that, you know, the way that popular art and popular film can foster conversations in ways that an academic text cannot. And I think that that was something that was always very exciting to him. And so he has a little cameo in the movie too. He came out to set. Yeah, and yeah, he's just been a great supporter. And it's also interesting and exciting because you know, he is somebody who is out there more directly advocating for this action. I also think that creates an interesting contrast with the film as well, because you kind of have this, even in that there's like a counterpoint, because the film is, I think, significantly less militant and significantly less, it's just more complicated, because once you actually see something like this happen, it takes on a different kind of shape. And so I think that that also is something that, you know, when we do joint events, it's really compelling and interesting. And I think that he also likes and appreciates that contrast.
So Ariella and Shaul, you also did you work with the writer also while making the script and while converting it in the non-fiction to fiction genre? You worked with Andreas Mams also?
Yeah, Andres was totally involved throughout the process. When we first met with him, he connected us to just cool people to talk to who were out in the activist world, who were organizing publicly, and he kind of kickstarted our research for us in that sense, and was just a great person to consult with throughout and he came to set and hung out when we shot.
So he was, through the entire right from fiction to non-fiction scripting, every stage, and even the making of the film, he was involved throughout making of the movie.
Yeah, he was
Right?
pretty consistently involved. Yeah.
Yeah, it must have been a great feeling for him, you know. In fact, we have a segment also here in IFFI this time called Book 2 Box Office. I mean, it perfectly matches, you know, it's a perfect sample of that one. And if we don't have any more questions, yeah.
My question is to Daniel. Usually the books that are adapted to screen, I mean, 90% of the time one can say that they are fiction books because it's easier to translate it into characters, the broad story is there. How different was it to translate a non-fiction book into a screenplay and then take it to screen?
Yeah, I mean, with this, there were kind of two big things that went into this. I think one of them is just with, I think, especially in the American system right now, there's kind of a real obsession with intellectual property, IP adaptations, and I think there's much less of appreciation for an original screenplay as something that kind of can exist on its own terms. And so one of the inspirations was actually the movie Nomadland, which is a film that was also based on a nonfiction book, and you see that movie and Frances McDormand is in it, and you kind of know as as an American filmmaker, there's very little chance that movie gets made if it's not adapted from a book. The book is kind of the pretext to go out and make a movie like this, and that's how financing structures work. And with this movie, that was especially the case because I think that if we had just kind of gone out with a completely original movie about eco-terrorism, people would have been like, this is insane. But that we can kind of point and say, well, these aren't our ideas. These are his ideas, and we're wrestling with them, and we're making them. We're looking at them from all these different angles. We're bringing in all these different communities, and all these different backgrounds and characters to this. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, that's a really interesting thing, and that's actually, I think, a really great pretext for a movie like this. So, on that level, I think the movie can't really exist without the book, but. Otherwise, I think as Ariella said, the process of the adaptation was one of just trying to find this story in real life. And so Ariella in particular brought a number of cultural consultants and collaborators onto the project. I think that once we kind of went out and figured out who in the world might actually do something like this and what those motivations might be, then the story and the drama arises very very naturally from that. And I think the other thing that I would maybe say is that for my process in particular, but it's the process that is also I've developed working with Ariella and Jordan and Daniel over the last many years, is a process that's also very much rooted in kind of taking very concrete ideas and figuring out how to dramatize them. And so, I think that one of the things about this movie that was great is with other films, sometimes it's a very long process to figure out what the ideas of the movie even are. You have a feeling, you have a notion, you have an image, and then you start interrogating, what is the actual idea here? What is the message? What is the movie saying? What is the movie not saying? But with this, it was great because somebody handed us our argument, and then it was just a matter of trying to figure out how to bring that argument to life. And so it was almost like the first part of the development had been done for us, and that was something that was, I think, as Ariella said, extremely liberating.
That's what good movies do, generate conversations even after the movie's over, and images and emotions which linger with us even after we walk out of the movie screen. If there are no more questions, we'll close this interaction. Big thank you to all of you and both the movie teams. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.